Ladies and gentlemen, if you think you already know what happened to Lynette Hooker on that luxury sailboat called Soulmate, you need to forget everything right now. Because this case just took a terrifying turn that nobody saw coming. And according to new reports surrounding the investigation, the truth may have been hiding inside the yacht's own electrical system the entire time. At first, the story sounded tragic. A husband claiming his wife vanished into the dark waters of the Bahamas, a helpless night at sea, rough currents, a drifting dinghy, and a desperate fight for survival. But now, investigators are reportedly uncovering digital evidence that completely destroys that emotional story piece by piece. Because while Brian Hooker allegedly told authorities he was stranded for hours in the open ocean, newly examined battery logs, onboard network pings, witness statements, and suspicious activity coming from inside the yacht may suggest something far more sinister was happening behind closed doors. And the most chilling part? Authorities believe the boat itself may have secretly recorded the entire timeline. We're talking about power spikes inside the yacht at the exact moment Brian claimed he was lost at sea, marine pumps suddenly activating in the middle of the night, interior lights turning on, refrigeration systems opening, and devices reportedly connecting back to the vessel's Starlink network long after he claimed he was gone. That's not all. Witnesses near the harbor say they allegedly heard a massive splash coming directly from the location where the Soulmate was anchored, while weather reports from that same night are now raising even more disturbing questions. Because according to radar data, a concentrated storm reportedly passed right through the exact area Brian claimed he drifted across for hours. Yet rescuers allegedly found him completely dry. And once federal investigators started digging into Brian's past, things became even darker. Records reportedly revealed previous accusations involving GPS tampering and location manipulation technology, a discovery that has now sent the entire true crime world into absolute shock. But what investigators may have found missing from that yacht could be the most horrifying detail of all. Because now, according to multiple reports tied to the case, authorities are allegedly examining missing workout weights, depleted diving tanks, and disturbing evidence that could completely change what people thought happened to Lynette forever. This is no longer just a missing person mystery. This is starting to look like a digital crime scene, where every battery log, every network ping, every movement inside that yacht may have silently trapped the person investigators are now looking at the hardest. And trust me, what we're about to break down today only gets darker from here. The first crack in Brian Hooker's story didn't come from police. It came from the weather itself. Because according to newly discussed radar reports tied to that night in the Bahamas, conditions on the water may have looked nothing like the nightmare Brian described to investigators. He allegedly painted this horrifying image of violent currents, darkness, and impossible conditions that kept him from saving his wife after she supposedly disappeared from their dinghy. But local data and witness accounts are now creating a completely different picture, one that investigators reportedly cannot ignore anymore. And this is where the timeline starts falling apart. Reports claim a highly concentrated rainstorm moved directly across the exact route Brian said he drifted through for hours in an open boat. Think about that for a second. A man supposedly stranded at sea, exposed to heavy rain, rough water, and panic for nearly an entire night. Yet when rescuers finally located him, multiple discussions surrounding the case claim he appeared strangely dry. Not soaked. Not freezing. Not even acting like someone who had spent endless hours fighting for survival in brutal weather conditions. And according to people analyzing the rescue timeline online, Brian allegedly never even emphasized the rain during his explanations to authorities. Instead, he reportedly focused on emotional details and confusion surrounding Lynette's disappearance, but barely addressed the storm that should have drenched him completely. That alone raised eyebrows. But then came the witness statement that changed everything. Because people staying near the harbor reportedly told investigators they heard a massive splash late that night coming directly from the area where the Soulmate yacht was anchored. And this wasn't some tiny sound in the distance. Witnesses allegedly described it as heavy, violent, and impossible to ignore in the middle of the quiet marina night. Now here's the terrifying part. Brian's official version of events suggested he and Lynette were already far away from the yacht during the supposed accident. So if that's true, then who, or what, caused that loud splashback near the anchored boat hours later? That question has become one of the creepiest parts of this entire mystery. Because investigators reportedly started looking at the possibility that someone may have returned to the yacht after Lynette vanished. And once federal agents began digging through the vessel itself, The case reportedly transformed from a tragic disappearance into something much darker, a floating digital crime scene. The yacht wasn't just a normal sailboat. According to reports, the Soulmate was packed with advanced technology. Cameras mounted around the vessel. Satellite internet systems. Smart electronics. Security devices. Network-connected equipment. Brian himself was reportedly known for being extremely tech-savvy and obsessed with electronic systems on board. And without realizing it, investigators believe that technology may have quietly recorded his every move. Because once authorities allegedly pulled data from the yacht's onboard systems, they reportedly discovered something deeply disturbing. Devices connected to Brian, including his phone and wearable tech, were still communicating with the yacht's Starlink network long after he claimed he was drifting helplessly at sea. That changes everything. If those reports are accurate, then Brian's devices may have been close enough to the yacht to continue handshaking with its onboard systems, at the exact time he claimed he was nowhere near the vessel. But it gets even worse. Investigators reportedly uncovered data from the yacht's newly installed lithium marine batteries, and this is where the story starts sounding like something straight out of a psychological thriller. Because these weren't ordinary batteries. Reports claim the system stored advanced power usage logs capable of tracking electrical activity throughout the vessel. And according to people close to the investigation, those logs allegedly recorded sudden spikes in power usage during the exact hours Brian claimed he was lost at sea. Not small spikes either. We're talking about activity reportedly consistent with interior lights turning on, water pumps activating, appliances opening, systems being used inside the yacht. Meaning someone may have been on board the entire time. Someone moving around in the darkness while Lynette was missing. Someone allegedly cleaning up, changing clothes, or preparing a completely different story before authorities ever arrived. And once people online realized this timeline might point back toward the yacht itself, social media exploded. True crime communities started comparing the case to famous digital forensics investigations where criminals were ultimately exposed not by eyewitnesses, but by their own technology. Because in today's world, investigators don't just follow fingerprints anymore. They follow battery logs, network pings, device connections, digital exhaust. And according to growing speculation surrounding this case, the Soulmate sailboat may have become the one witness Brian Hooker never expected to testify against him. But the deeper investigators allegedly dug into Brian Hooker's past, the darker this entire case became. Because according to reports now circulating online, this may not have been the first time Brian was accused of manipulating location data to hide where he really was. Investigators reportedly uncovered employment records connected to his previous career that described incidents involving GPS tampering and tracking manipulation technology. And once that information surfaced publicly, people immediately started asking the same terrifying question. Was this entire disappearance carefully planned long before the Bahamas trip ever happened? Think about how disturbing that possibility really is. You have a man reportedly obsessed with technology, advanced electronics, tracking systems, onboard security equipment, and digital networking. Then suddenly his wife vanishes under mysterious circumstances in the middle of the ocean, while multiple pieces of digital evidence allegedly begin contradicting his own story. That's the kind of timeline that instantly grabs federal attention. And according to discussions surrounding the case, investigators allegedly started noticing another major red flag almost immediately after Lynette disappeared: Brian's behavior afterward. Because instead of remaining in the Bahamas searching endlessly for his missing wife, reports claim he left surprisingly fast. This part shocked a lot of people following the investigation online. Brian had reportedly told family members and authorities he wouldn't stop searching until Lynette was found. Emotional statements were allegedly made. Hope was supposedly still alive. Search crews were active. Family members were desperate for answers. But according to reports tied to the timeline, Brian allegedly left the islands within days and returned to the United States while the investigation was still exploding publicly. And that decision created massive backlash. True crime communities instantly began questioning why a husband whose wife supposedly vanished at sea would leave so quickly while authorities were still searching the water. Some online critics described the move as suspicious. Others claimed it looked like panic. And investigators reportedly began examining whether Brian was trying to distance himself from the scene before deeper forensic analysis could be completed on the yacht. Because by this point, the Soulmate wasn't just being treated like a boat anymore. Federal investigators allegedly began treating it like a floating hard drive. Every inch of that yacht reportedly mattered. Every camera angle. Every electronic device. Every missing item. Every power fluctuation. And once authorities allegedly started inventorying the vessel's contents, they reportedly discovered something deeply unsettling involving Lynette's fitness equipment. According to reports, Lynette regularly worked out on board using heavy dumbbells and diving gear while living on the yacht. Friends described her as fitness-focused and active. Social media posts allegedly showed the couple refilling scuba tanks shortly before the disappearance. But when investigators later examined the vessel, some of those heavy items were reportedly missing. And this is where the theories turned horrifying. Because according to growing speculation tied to the case, investigators allegedly started considering whether heavy workout weights or diving equipment could have been used to keep a body from resurfacing in deep water. Now, to be clear, these remain theories and investigative discussions surrounding the case. But the fact authorities reportedly focused so heavily on missing weights and depleted diving tanks tells you just how serious this investigation has become. Especially after another disturbing detail surfaced. According to reports, Brian's scuba tanks were allegedly found significantly depleted, while Lynette's tanks reportedly remained mostly untouched. That single detail sent social media into chaos. Because people immediately began wondering why one set of tanks appeared heavily used while the other did not, particularly during a timeline where Brian claimed he had spent hours lost and helpless at sea. And suddenly, online investigators started putting the entire story together differently. The splash heard near the yacht. The suspicious digital activity on board. The dry clothes. The missing weights. The power spikes inside the vessel. The network connections. The depleted tanks. One by one, every piece allegedly started pointing investigators back toward the Soulmate itself. But what really terrified people was the idea that modern technology may have quietly trapped someone who believed they could outsmart everyone around them. Because according to experts discussing the case online, criminals today don't just leave fingerprints anymore. They leave invisible timelines. Your smartwatch tracks movement. Your phone tracks location. Your internet router logs connections. Your batteries track electrical usage. Even opening a refrigerator door can leave a digital footprint. And if reports surrounding this case are true, investigators may have reconstructed an entire night of activity simply by reading the silent electronic evidence left behind on that yacht. That's why this story has exploded far beyond just another missing persons case. People aren't just watching for updates anymore. They're watching to see whether technology itself may become the key witness in proving what really happened to Lynette Hooker that night aboard the Soulmate. And according to people close to the investigation, the darkest revelations may still be coming. And just when people thought this case couldn't get any more disturbing, investigators reportedly uncovered one final detail that may end up haunting this entire story forever. Because according to growing discussions tied to the investigation, authorities allegedly believe the biggest mistake Brian Hooker made was assuming the ocean would erase the evidence. But the problem is, the ocean wasn't the only witness out there that night. The yacht was watching too. By this stage of the investigation, federal agents reportedly weren't looking at the Soulmate as a simple crime scene anymore. They allegedly began reconstructing it minute by minute like a digital timeline. Every electrical surge. Every network connection. Every movement inside the vessel. Investigators reportedly wanted to know exactly what happened on board during the hours Lynette disappeared. And according to reports surrounding the forensic review, the activity logs allegedly showed patterns that simply didn't match Brian's emotional survival story. Because while he claimed he was stranded in panic somewhere in the dark waters of the Bahamas, the yacht itself reportedly appeared strangely active. Lights turning on. Systems activating. Power surges moving through the vessel. Even signs that someone may have used freshwater systems on board during the exact period Brian claimed he was drifting helplessly at sea. That detail absolutely stunned people following the case. Because if investigators are correct, then somebody may have returned to the yacht after Lynette disappeared and calmly moved around inside while the world believed a desperate husband was fighting to survive in the ocean. And once social media started connecting all these pieces together, the internet exploded with theories. Some believed Brian allegedly staged the entire timeline from the beginning. Others wondered whether the dinghy story itself was partially fabricated to explain why Lynette was never found. And then came the most terrifying theory of all. What if Lynette never disappeared miles away at sea like everyone originally believed? What if whatever happened to her allegedly happened much closer to the yacht itself? That possibility completely changed the emotional direction of the case. Because suddenly people began revisiting the witness who reportedly heard that massive splash near the anchored vessel late at night. At first, it sounded like a random detail buried inside a complicated investigation. But now, online investigators believe that sound may have been one of the most important clues in the entire timeline. A heavy splash. Late at night. Near the Soulmate. At a time Brian allegedly claimed he was nowhere near the boat. That's the kind of contradiction federal investigators reportedly cannot ignore. And according to reports tied to the case, the deeper authorities looked into Brian's actions after the disappearance, the more suspicious certain moments allegedly became. People online started questioning why he reportedly spoke so much about tiny irrelevant details while avoiding key forensic questions. Others noticed how quickly the narrative seemed focused on portraying him as a tragic survivor before digital evidence allegedly started telling a different story. But perhaps the creepiest part of this entire investigation is how silent technology may have exposed everything. No dramatic confession. No eyewitness standing on the dock. No hidden video suddenly leaked online. Just electronics. Cold, silent, electronic records. Battery logs that allegedly tracked activity inside the yacht. Internet systems reportedly recording nearby device connections. Power usage spikes suggesting movement on board. And digital timestamps quietly reconstructing a version of events investigators may now trust more than human testimony itself. That's what makes this case feel so terrifying to people watching online. Because if these reports are true, then modern technology may have turned the Soulmate sailboat into the perfect witness. A witness that never sleeps, never forgets, and never changes its story. Meanwhile, Lynette's loved ones are still waiting for answers. And despite all the online theories, speculation, and growing public pressure, one horrifying fact remains unchanged. Lynette Hooker has still never been found. No confirmed body. No final explanation. Just a growing mountain of suspicious evidence. And a timeline that allegedly becomes darker every single week. Now investigators continue examining every detail connected to that night in the Bahamas, while true crime communities remain convinced this story is far from over. Because according to people closely following the case, authorities may still be analyzing additional forensic evidence recovered from the yacht systems. And if more digital records surface publicly, this entire mystery could completely explode all over again. Because right now, one question still hangs over the Soulmate sailboat like a shadow nobody can escape. If Brian Hooker truly spent that night lost alone at sea, then who was still inside the yacht? So what do you think really happened aboard the Soulmate that night? Was this truly a tragic accident at sea, or did digital evidence quietly expose a much darker story hiding behind the headlines? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this case is getting more disturbing with every new detail that surfaces. And if more forensic evidence gets released publicly, everything we think we know right now could completely change overnight. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next major update. Because trust me, this investigation is far from over.